Good evening and welcome to Hot Topics from the Soul. I'm your host, Dr. Valerie Parker Hagan, and I'm so delighted we got a great show for you tonight. But I want to acknowledge that it is Black History Month. I have my co host, Dr. J.R. Thicklin.
And good evening. And you're exactly right. It is Black History Month as well. And so, as we acknowledge the contributions that Blacks have made to this country, to this world, we want to keep in mind that Black History 365, 7 days a week. And let's highlight the accomplishments and the achievements that we have made individually and collectively as Black people.
Actually, that is awesome, Dr. J. We have come a long way, made many strives towards greatness.
Well, you're exactly right. That is one of the reasons why we can always be encouraged as a people. Our resiliency, our history shows that we are overcomers. We're builders. We're victorious. We're resilient people. We are people who understand results. We are people that understand what it means to overcome. We as a people are not normally fragile at all because we have gone through so much that we're like Teflon. Okay, we are Teflon. We bend and we very seldom break. And so we have a lot to be proud of. We have a lot to be able to say that there's no other group that can tout the fact of how much we have overcome. Every time the goalpost is moved, every time it's moved, we just find a way to get to it again. And so we're resilient people. We need to celebrate that inside of one another, and that itself will lift us as a people.
Absolutely correct, Dr. J. And we're going to continue on with the relationships this month. You know, February, Valentine's Day, love's in the air, breakups, makeups, get together. You know, it all happens here in February. So much is going on in February, but I'm glad to still be here. And tonight we're going to continue with relationships, but relationships and mental health.
Absolutely. What a topic to go together because relationships and mental health they are paramount. Relationships are one of the most important aspects of our lives. We thrive inside of relationships. When we look at relationship, whether we're talking about family relationship, being socially connected to family and friends, or we talk about a relationship with a significant other, all of those things are significant when it comes to our health, our being happy, because when we're happy in those relationships, we're generally healthier as a people because we're not dealing with things like anxiety and stress and health problems and those things, because an unhealthy relationship will stress you out.
Yes, it will absolutely indeed stress you out. And you know, my background coming from domestic violence, and I have found and discovered at this space in my life that there are
Yeah.
so many individuals, men and women, that are suffering from post traumatic stress relating from their past, and therefore ergo why so many individuals can't seem to find a mate because of the traumas of their past, and they're not realizing the emotional damage that they've suffered throughout their childhood, and they suppressed it during their adulthood just to be able to function.
Well, you hit it on the head because when you don't recognize it, you can't address it. So a lot of time we have endured untreated trauma, meaning that it's been there. We've been exposed to things. We've lived this way. The residual is still there. And where does it show up? It shows up in other relationships. It shows up in decisions. It shows up in our patterns. Sometimes we tend to have a pattern of choosing toxic people. It's almost as the fact that, different name, but same game,
Mhm.
because of the fact of that impact. And if we never address it, if we never address it and really seek help for it, then what happens, it becomes normalized and it
Yes.
becomes your norm. We've all seen people that their norm is chaos. Their norm is always a fuss, a fight. Their norm is always something toxic, and they look at you like, "What you talking about?" But the reality is that that's not where we should want to be, and definitely not where we want to remain if we find ourselves there.
Right. And if you find yourself in a relationship like that, a lot of people feel that they can love them through whatever pain they suffered from their past. And that's not always the case. That's not always a remedy. You need psychological help in order to address the demons of the past.
You're exactly right. And so often, what happened, we have a philosophical paradox in that, in one sense, there's that side of us that is benevolent and compassion, and we feel like all this person need is just a little bit more love. They just need a little bit more love, and I can love them out of this. I and only I can love them out of this. And so we will spend time trying to love people who don't even love themselves, trying to correct people who's not willing to be corrected, trying to find the right buttons to push, the right things to do, the right frequency of it, so that we can win their good behavior, that we can win their affection, that we can win some type of sustainability, some type of consistency. And most time we find ourselves spent. We are exhausted. We've wasted much mental energy because we put so much into it, and yet and still we find ourselves still on that other end. And so we have to learn not to try to play hero or shero ball. I'm going to rescue this person. I'm going to do that. No, understand the signs. Understand what you have a capacity to deal with. And because if you don't, believe me, toxic relationship will wear you down.
Right. And there are individuals that are suffering because they've had a loss of a child. It's a very traumatic thing to carry a child and then lose the child because
Absolutely.
the memories of what could have been and what should have been haunts them. So that is another level of post-traumatic stress. And then there's occasions where a woman will give birth to a child and still suffer from trauma because they call it postpartum trauma, because their hormones have shifted in them because of giving birth, and they don't know how to address the issue. They don't know because they don't recognize what's going on, and it's a form of depression. You want something so badly, and then when you have it, you're depressed about it. Can't hear you, Dr. J. Somehow you muted yourself. Okay. You got it.
When we look at postpartum depression, part of it is you talk about hormones, you talk about those things, but the other part is also psychological, meaning the fact that a person will go into depression, sometimes feeling now useless. I produced this child, I produced these babies, and yet it's still, I don't feel loved, or I feel like I've given my all. I now feel insignificant because this was what was important to you. And so all of those things are part of relationships, and also part of what we call nurturing one another.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we know about toxic relationship oftentimes is absent of nurturing and compassion, is absence of those things. And so we have to be very careful. And if I may speak freely, we must be very careful. You can have all the good physical passion that you want for each other. It doesn't mean that the relationship is nurturing whatsoever. Ever. It means that there's a physical or sexual benefit that you are enjoying, but it does not mean that the relationship in and of itself is healthy. And that's the thing we have to be very cognizant of when we start talking about our relationships and mental health. People have gone crazy inside a relationship. People have lost it. They said,
fatal attractions.
Yeah, a fatal attraction. I'm about to lose my mind up in here, because of the fact of relationship. Not just mere misunderstanding, but oftentimes due to, if you would, consistent and ongoing violations, ongoing inconsideration, ongoing devaluing, ongoing abuse or hostility. And as a result of it, a person finds themselves in a toxic relationship. And if they stay too long, they then start to begin to feel bad about themselves, their quality of life. Who am I? So it has a lot to do with the things that we're going at. And then thank you very much, Christina Moore. She says concern about how having a baby has changed the physical body. All that does have a lot to do with the postpartum depression. And so relationships and mental health are so inextricably tied that research shows that when we are in a healthy relationship, when we're in a healthy relationship, whether it's a healthy nuclear family or where we got healthy friends, our close friends relationship, when we're in those type of healthy relationship, guess what happens? We not only live longer, but we produce more endorphins. We produce more life. We are more upbeat because we're in a healthy relationship. There are some folks that will find themselves in a relationship just for the sake of saying they're in a relationship, and
Exactly.
oftentimes it is demanding. It is destructive. It eats away at your self-esteem. You find yourself overly suspicious, and that's one of those warning signs when you often feel suspicious. And let me say this because this is so important. Sometimes the other party said, "What you suspicious about? You never caught me doing this. You never caught me doing that." Please keep in mind the operative word is caught. Caught. That person is not saying they didn't do it. They're just simply saying you never caught them. But there's something about your sixth sense that causes you to have this suspicion. When you often feel suspicious all the time and you cannot trust that individual, you know what is happening, Dr. Val? Your mind is working overtime.
Mhm.
Your
Well,
mind is
a lot
working
of it is
overtime.
because of fear. They're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of being alone. They're afraid that, okay, if they allow this person to walk out that door out of their lives, that it'll be maybe never or a long time before they ever meet anyone else. And because of the familiarity of that individuals, that person knows me, they know my going and comings, and so I don't, I'm afraid to try something else. I'm afraid to try something new. I'm afraid of losing what I have, even if it's not good for me, even if it's toxic. That fear that overwhelms you till you allow yourself to stay in a situation that you shouldn't be in. That's what kept me in a relationship. I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? 4 children, and I was still young. What am I going to do, without this person? I call, what are people going to say about me because I'm divorced? The self-esteem saying, oh, you couldn't hold on to a man. Oh, this happened and that happened, and that's why she's alone. The voices we hear in our head, the story we create
Right.
about ourselves is what we believe, and it's normally a negative vibe that we put out, and it's not necessarily what people are saying or thinking, but it's your perception of what you feel is being said about you that drags you down even into a deeper depression because of words.
Yeah. What happens? We paint our own narrative, and you're exactly right. And sometimes we paint our own narrative based upon different set of thoughts and belief system. For instance, for those of us that may exist in the spiritual realm of Christianity or whatever, there are many times people feel shame. They feel shame. They feel like a failure because of that big word called divorce. And so
Mhm.
now, because of divorce, and we know that quote unquote God hates divorce, we now take it as if, watch this, that God has rejected us, that somehow or
Right.
another God has found us unpleasurable, unpleasing, and we can never please God. Well, look at your theology. That's got to be all wrong, because guess what? When we were all yet sinners, he died for the ungodly. He didn't say, well, I
Mhm.
died for everything but divorce. He didn't say that. And so what we understand that even inside of that, God has a way of reconciling. God has a way of giving us lessons even inside of those failures. So we have to make sure that we might be missing out on God providing a second chance or a third chance or whatever, because
Mhm.
we cannot get over the past divorce, the past hurt. And
Or the
then
doctrine that was implanted in our
the
head
doctrine
to
that was
believe
implanted.
that we're now exiled
Yeah.
from God because of the fact that we left that toxic relationship, we left that divorce, or even the fact that we even engaged in a sexual relationship. We
Yeah.
put so much burden on ourselves and our self-esteem to feel that we're damaged goods, and because we embrace that into our soul, into our psyche, we begin to believe the story. And here again, it goes back to, what story are you creating about yourself?
Dr. Val, you hit it on the head, because see, we all create these narratives, as you said. But when we begin to internalize things and now they become part of our belief system, we nurture those things. And whatever we nurture, that's what grows. That's where fear and anxiety go. Sometimes I'm sad. I'm saddened by people who I know love God and all those things. And they have, if you would, they have resigned their life to a life of loneliness, never to ever believe God ever again for a relationship, a healthy marriage or whatever, because of a previous bad marriage or a divorce. And so now, guess what?
Or it's taught once you're married, you're
Right.
always married, and that you can't, and once you're divorced, you can't get married again. That was
Yeah.
a damnable doctrine that was passed along, and some people still believe it, that their sentencing is never to be married again, even though it was because of domestic violence, or if it
Mhm.
was because the person left the marriage and divorced and went into somebody else. Why should I be alone if that other person left the marriage? It didn't make sense to me. I saw so many beautiful young women that was staying single because of the fact that they were married, and then they're a product of divorce, and the doctrine that they believe says that they couldn't get married again. So could you bring clarity to that, Dr. J? Because I know there's a lot of women in the audience that are listening in that have embraced that damnable spirit and are reaping pain and heartache, wanting to be in a relationship, but because of the narrative.
You know, there go once again one of those theological paradox, meaning the fact that it's a twisted. Watch this. The Bible says that the letter killeth. Okay, so it killeth, but the spirit maketh alive. And so oftentimes what people do is they look at the letter of it and they never discern the spirit of it. Let's go. What is the spirit of it? God is love. God is wholeness. God is forgiveness. God is restoration. God is liberty. Whom the Son makes free is free indeed. And so when people find themselves, if you would, chained and bound to their past, even when that past was abusive. And you know, we travel the country addressing domestic violence, particularly in the church amongst believers, how the church must become better equipped and stop sending people to graves, stop holding people inside of abusive relationship, stop putting people where you now have generational trauma going on because people stayed in abusive relationship because they was told that, listen, I can't get out. I made
Right.
my vow.
That's what I was told.
And I've got to stay here.
Mhm.
But here's the thing, and I will keep championing this. It's written in my books, in my manuals that I've dealt with domestic violence and church. Understand, divorce is not what breaks the marital covenant. The domestic violence and abuse broke the marital covenant. In other words, love your wives as Christ have loved the church. No man abuses his own body. And so inside of that, we're looking at the wrong thing. We're looking at the fact of, if you would, the bill of divorcement. Well, that broke the marital covenant. No, the abuse broke the marital covenant. Yeah,
Yes.
the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, the emotional abuse, the verbal abuse, the abandonment, all of those things there did so. And for me as a leader, to try to encourage a person, stay right there, baby. But you're being physically abused, you're being
Mhm.
mentally abused, you're being sexually abused, you have been,
You
you
need
have,
to fast and pray. God will fix it.
no, no. Let me
But
say,
God won't change or fix someone that doesn't want to be fixed or changed. God gives us free will, and you have to choose it.
you're exactly right. And then we have to understand, even what the scripture said, it says this. It says, "For the wrath of man does not work the righteousness of God." That means what? A man getting angry, and when I say man, not necessarily the sex of male or
Right.
female, but a person get angry. That does not work the righteousness of God. There are people who live in relationships that are very hostile, very toxic. And they may be married to someone who's carrying a Bible, wearing a cross, or whatever. That doesn't sanctify your relationship because they're wearing a cross. They themselves have violated the covenant, and you're going along for the picture. You're going along for the optics. You're going along there. And I'm here to tell you, the question was asked of the man who had been there at the pool of Bethesda all those years, will thou be made whole? And that's what you got to understand. When you're in toxic relationship, you cannot be whole. You're not whole. It will lead to depression. It will lead to anxiety. It will lead, even in some cases, to suicide. So we have to be very careful about this. And the enemy knows how to do it, because the enemy works on our mind, our mental health system. It is no different than a person who constantly puts you down, call you name, tell you that you're nobody. I don't know why I'm with you in the first place. You're the ugliest person I've ever been with. I could have been with anybody but you. And constant to put down. And so what we often say is, long before, you don't have to wait till somebody hit you or slap you, long before a victim is ever beaten up, they're beaten down by words. They're being down by those things. So those are toxic relationships, baby. I don't care what. I don't care how fine they are. For every woman, I don't care how many muscles he got. For every brother, I don't care how many curves she has. It's not worth your mental health. It's not worth your, because your personage of your soul, you can't even rest. You can't even enjoy God's creation, because you're in something that is toxic. And you just need to come to a resolve within yourself. Is this the will of God for me to remain in this toxic relationship? You done gone toothless. You done gone with bruises and things because of the abuse. And you're saying, God, I'm just looking for a way of escape. Listen, he's already made the way of escape. Find safety in God. He is our refuge and our strength.
Indeed, indeed. I'm telling you, almost painted my story because I lived it. And, to see that God has turned everything around, I kept holding on to that scripture that the Lord gave me, that, my latter will be greater than my former. My latter will be greater than my former. My latter will be greater than my former. We all pay a price to be who we are. At some stage of our life, we all pay a price, and wherever we find ourselves in lives, we made an appointment to be there. So where we are, we can grow from where we are. We can't allow individuals to snatch our lives, snatch our breath away. And that's what happens with you. They hold you by the neck. And even though that person is gone, they still control your neck, and you allow your breath to be taken away. And I'm saying to the men and women that are listening, breathe.
Oh, real good. Breathe. Breathing is very important, because, everything about us is predicated upon the ability to breathe, to inhale and to exhale.
Mm-hmm.
Inhale the goodness.
This is not the end of your story. Yes.
Yes. Inhale. But when you exhale the toxins, exhale all those things that have come against you. And I say to somebody that's watching tonight, even someone that's watching tonight, you've been in bondage for a long time, mentally and physically. You're so worried about pleasing the folks around you, and what the church mother going to say, what those people going to say. Listen, say what you want to, but listen, when God has made you free, you are free indeed. He is a God of another chance.
Right.
We skim through, we love looking at scripture, and we talk about Job, and everybody talk about what Job went through. And if you really read it, it talks about Job, getting down to the point of being sick where his flesh is falling from his bone. And even that same wife, could you imagine that same wife that when everything was going great, the same wife who was showing up at all the social events, the same wife who had it, all the things was great, and she used to brag about it. Now he's at his low. And what happened? She looks at him and says, look here, basically, I'm ashamed of you, Job. Why don't you just curse your God and die? Well, Job replied was, woman, you sound like a foolish woman, because Job understood the very candlestick that keeps me going, the very thing that keeps me going is what I'm believing on. And now when God replenishes and give him double for his trouble, do you think he had the same wife? Oh, no, she had to go. God had to replace her too.
And you said something very crucial, Dr. J. A lot of people want to still hold on to their past, hold on to their baggage, even though they have been given the liberty to let it go.
Exactly. But I think something that you said earlier was very important too. And it is the fact that people keep rehearsing the same story. If you continue to rehearse your failures, you will keep reproducing your failure, because whatever we nurture, that's what grows. Whatever we nurture, if we nurture plants, the plants grow. If we nurture whatever we nurture, it grows. And so we have to change our mindset and change our energy so that now I'm no longer bondage. This is not Lazarus. He's in grave clothes and he's jumping because the Lord said, Lazarus come forth. No, we've got to take that lesson. I mean, guess what? Though I was dead in that last relationship, though I was dead in that past abuse, though I was dead and in bondage, I hear the Lord say, come forth. And so when I come forth, guess what? I come forth and I hear the word, loose that man and let him go. You got to receive that. Loose your mind, loose your psyche, loose your heart, loose it and let it go. Because I do believe this, that God has a way of healing us. God has a way of healing us. And God can create a capacity inside of you to love again. To love again. Don't let no one extinguish your heart's desire. Don't let anyone extinguish your desire to enjoy love, to enjoy what God wants you to enjoy. You're not getting any medals of honor, no badges or trophy because you looking sad and they ain't got nobody. I'm just holding out. No. You ain't gonna get nobody. Because if you don't make a step, if you don't make yourself open to God, lead and guide me, God, what is it that you would have me to do? Cause the eyes of my understanding to be enlightened. Sometimes we learn from the bad relationships we've been in. Sometimes when we've been the culprit in a bad relationship, the time away, the time to reflect gives us things to think about. What is it that I did? What is it that I did that was toxic? What is it that I was involved in that was so toxic? Many men, and I'll say this because in my over 30 something years in addressing domestic violence, both from the victim and perpetrator perspective, when people say, well, once a battle, always a battle, not necessarily true. If a person wants to change and they're willing to do the commitment to change in the work, they can change. And what happened, if a man, I'm going to say a man, if he has really truly examined himself and want to change, he's going to change, and it's not going to be on those system of where he's trying to barter with you. Well, if you take me back, then I'll change. If you give me another chance, I promise I'll go get counseling. No, that's not how that works. No, you go get counseling, you change because you recognize you need to change.
You need to change.
There's something in you is toe up from the flow up, and if you don't have nobody to come your way, you need that change. And when you make that change and you understand the way you see people changes. The way you value people changes. The way, and that goes on both sides of the coin. When you have been in a toxic and very poor relationship that affect who you are, you lose your sense of value. You lose, what's the girl named Rihanna who sung at the Super Bowl? I think one of her songs, "Shine Bright Like a Diamond." And listen, when you have been in toxic relationships, when you have been in sustained toxic relationship, it will knock the shine off of you. It'll knock the shine off of you. Listen, you're tarnished. You're tarnished, and you feel tarnished, and you feel that you're not significant. But you've got to understand that you are, and you simply got to give yourself permission, change the narrative, change your story, and you'll change your destiny.
Well, I think one way that they'll be able to do that is they begin to love themselves. You've got to love who you are. You got to love the space you're in. You got to love the air that you breathe. You got to love you. You got to love your snaggletooth. You got to love your hair or no hair. You've got to love you from the inside out. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to progress. But a lot of individuals, you can't work this out on your own. You need to seek mental counseling. You need to get a psych therapist to help you walk through those valleys you've been in, because sometimes those valleys that you've been in have been so crucial that you've locked them in to this vault, this emotional vault, and then it cracks every now and then. It just cracks out into a relationship. Even if you're not in a relationship, you start lashing out at people and start resenting people that seem like they're in love. You start resenting people's lifestyles, and then you become bitter. because of where you are, and because you feel that you missed out. Love who you are and where you are right now. And what I said, love where you are right now. Take ownership of where you are and how you got there. Own it.
Wow.
Open your eyes so that you'll know, okay, this is where I am right now. So now, once you own it, you can address the issue.
You know what, Dr. Val, that is a $1 million piece of advice, because owning where you are, watch this. It's the same thing we say. We cannot change that which we're unwilling to confront.
Hmm.
We cannot confront that which we're unwilling to identify. We cannot identify that which we're unwilling to acknowledge. And we cannot acknowledge that which we're unwilling to accept. And until I
Hmm.
can own, see, I had to own my stuff. I had to own. It's never been all on somebody else.
Right.
I, there's a part I played in there, whether it was my action or my reaction. Mhm. That's a part that you play, but own that. Be willing to address that. Be willing to work on that so that you can free yourself, that you can be better. You don't have to be sentenced to a life of guilt, shame, embarrassment, isolation. You can't even go nowhere. Listen, you're afraid to be walking too close to anybody because you think they're going to think that you're with somebody. Listen, get free. Get free.
Mhm.
I said it, get free. And with that in mind, Dr. Val, definitely we welcome your comments. Those of you that are watching by way of social media, I see some of your comments there. Continue. If you have a question or comment there, please put it there in the chat that we may address it, because this is real about relationships and mental health.
Exactly. I mean, it covers a large range, and I'm trying to address all of the issues, from individuals that I come across, or even in my coaching sessions that I do with individuals. And there's so much pain. There's so much pain there. And I know about pain. I've been in pain and I know how to address the pain. So there's so much that goes into these casings that we're in. This body is our casing, and if you don't get help and you don't address those issues, you will combust, you will explode. And that's where the mental illness comes in, where you don't know how to control this because it has compiled so much year after year, layers upon layers, till you just blow up, and you don't know how to get an outlet. So seek professional counseling. I know those of you that, especially in the church world,
Yeah,
I mean, we have so many, what do you call, religious
yeah.
religious things going on and stuff too. We don't address the real issues. We address the heart of a person. How do we pull back those layers and pour that oil of Gilead in there to bring forth healing? There is a balm in Gilead, but are you open to receiving it? Are you open to be exposed to it so that healing can come?
You know, one of the things that we wrestle with is that we're really afraid of the pain, and yet and still the pain that we need to feel is the pain that of enough,
Yeah.
the pain of enough. This is enough. We don't draw the line, and because we don't draw the line, we just simply keep going, and we try to turn the page to another chapter, but we haven't dealt with what was in that previous chapter. And we got to be willing to deal with it, because if we're not willing to deal with it, you also close your bowel of compassion to ever receive love. There are individuals, because of a lot of things they've gone through, whether it's family and childhood trauma, growing up with trauma, neglect, abuse, things like poor attachment, uh, that have led to mental illness and mental health issues. And individuals, when they don't get help or they don't go through intervention for that, it just shows up in different parts of their life. And that's the thing that I often say to people, that, even children growing up being exposed to domestic violence is so important. Walk with them, get them help, because it will show up at the most inopportune time in their lives. And how many times I've seen people who have been so deeply hurt that even if love was coming their way,
They
they
would
find a,
recognize it.
they find a way to self-sabotage
Hmm.
because they're trying to find that pain. No, there's chaos here. As I said last week, so often we walk in a relationship and we keep waiting and looking for the other shoe to drop, something to go wrong. Why are you looking for something to go wrong? Why not put that energy and believe that something is going to go right? What is it that I can work on? What I can work on? And when I talk about, the fact of the damage that is done, and we're left tarnished in our hearts, tarnished in our spirit, that's not where God wants you to be. Not at all. He talks about renewing. He talks about putting a new song in your heart. Some of us need a new song. We've been singing the wrong song for way too long. There's a new song. Your broken heart needs mending. You need to trust God inside of things. We have become so, oh God, pessimistic. We're so pessimistic at times that we will grab defeat out of the jaws of victory. We can be right across the finish line and we'll trip and fall because in our psyche, we've told ourselves, too good to be true. It ain't gonna happen. Nothing good ever happened to me. Every time I try to get into something, it goes bad. Notice what you're rehearsing. Notice what you're rehearsing. Notice what you're rehearsing. Sometimes it gets so bad, Dr. Val, you start devaluing yourself and you start thinking, well, I don't deserve him. I don't deserve her. I don't deserve nobody like that. That's way out of my league. Notice your self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
Your self-talk
That's that low self-esteem. Low self-esteem.
Your self-talk has been predicated upon your experiences and what you have experienced, but you don't have to stay there.
Yeah, if somebody shunned you or made you feel inadequate, that's that dart, that wound that you carry that has never healed. That salve hasn't gone and then heal it. But let me tell you something, when you're satisfied with who you are, that goes back to loving yourself. When you're satisfied with who you are, there is a radiance, there is a light that goes out and it says, I'm here, I'm available, I'm free. Individuals can tell when something is going on with you because there's a darkness there. They're afraid to even some guys are afraid to address women and vice versa because they're like, oh man, I don't want to get my head chopped off. I don't want them to snap at me. Because men, I know guys like you, Dr. J, you're a very emotional person. You wear your emotions, you're like a teddy bear. So I know that if you got an aura from someone that said, somebody that was attracted, said, I would really like to know her or introduce myself to her, but I'm afraid. That aura, that there's an aura that goes out that says, that kind of identifies who you are and where you are in your life. And if you're open to the possibilities.
Dr. Val, listen, you hit it on the head because here's the thing that's happening. Remember, two different people, and they're both dealing with their life experiences differently. There are those who, because of what they've been in, they're guarded. And they set off an aura like, don't say nothing to me. I don't want to be bothered with you. Then there are those like myself. I'm not very forward inside of that. I'm a gentleman. That's probably the reason I end up becoming professional friends, because in fact, I'm a gentleman. I'm not going to move beyond the place that I'm allowed to go. But if you set off that vibe like that, I'm backing up because of the fact what you basically have said is that you're unwanted, you're unwelcome. I don't want to hear nothing that you've got to say. So where do I go from there? By the same token, what happens with the person that's praying, God, send me somebody, Lord, just send me? Well, you got to also check your attitude. You got to check your, I call it your spirit meter, your spirit meter. What spirit are you carrying here? If it's wounded, then let's get healed. But if you're truly trusting God, then listen, he will direct your path. And you got to understand something. Be willing to say, God, I trust you. I trust you. And then be willing to turn it on yourself and say, Lord, make me that person Make me to be that pliable person. Make me be that oracle. What is my role in someone's life? I don't want to leave a person worse than I found them. I
Right.
always want to be able that listen, even if it doesn't work out, I said, man, it was so great knowing this guy. He was that. But what you shouldn't leave with is that you've left what I call toxic traits all over the place, right? It's like, we can see the little bombs everywhere because of how you have engaged. But we have a lot of work to do. We have to love ourselves, as you said, and we have to believe that God has something for us and has someone for us inside of that. And that someone is not there to stress you out. They're not there to run you crazy. They're not there to disvalue you. They're not there not to listen to you. And we got to be all right and identified. And sometimes it gets hard because this is not a straight line. Dr. Val, there are people who have been lonely so long that when the door does open, sometimes they'll run into something and they'll stay there because they just want to be loved. They've forgotten about they still need to be valued. You still need to be valued. If you can't value a person, then what do you add to them? If I don't bring you value, then why am I there? And we just got to be able to start with loving ourselves and understanding that our relationships and mental health are so inextricably tied that it'll make the difference between you having high blood pressure, anxiety, whether or not you're sick, your physical health is failing because of the fact you're in a very high toxic relationship.
Well, we're almost out of time, Dr. J, but one of the things I do want to cover before we leave is friend zones.
Oh, my.
You can have that individual right there before you because you friend zoned them, you've shut the door, and you close the door of opportunity because you departmentalize them into a friend zone.
Dr. Val, you didn't have to step on my toes. The friend zone it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes the friend zone is good because it's a safe place. It's a safe place to land. You can speak freely without this sense of obligation. You can be yourself, and you don't feel like you got to put on the pretense. The problem with the friend zone is that when really there's a desire to have more, and now I start suppressing that desire. I'm afraid to express that desire. I'm afraid to even give you a clue that that's the way I feel. Or we make it
because you don't want to lose that
right.
friendship
or
pass that boundary you thought you set up. But I think when you find someone and meet someone and you start dating, I think the best way to handle that situation is to be of course start as friends, and then make it known that yeah, we can be friends, but I'm looking for something more. What are you looking for?
Exactly.
What are your expectations? If we is there any possibility, or let them know, put it on the table in the beginning. Yeah, I think you're a great person, but I don't think we'll be able to be in a romantic situation. But you don't want to keep dragging and imposing on that person when you know that it's not going any further than a friend zone.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that when you have concluded it's going to be a friend zone, then you have to reset boundaries. You have to reset boundaries. If we're just friends, I shouldn't have to pay for everything when we go out.
Exactly.
Like you, my significant other. If we're just friends,
and then with no expectations of
right.
anything leading towards romantic. I'm
Right.
not your fill-in. Meanwhile, in between time.
Right. Exactly. And we have to be very intentional and deliberate about that. We need to know that we shouldn't lead a person on either. We shouldn't lead them on.
Because that becomes to another emotional trauma, which leads into a mental breakdown. because of
Oh,
the fact that they turn around and say, okay, what's wrong with me? Why can't I be loved? Why can't I get married? Why can't I have children? Why can't I be in a relationship? And it puts emotional pressure.
it does. I lived up under that cloud for a while, where I would say, even through childhood and young, nice guys finish last, and I couldn't believe those negative words was come out of my mouth, but it had been my experience. You're a great guy, but you're wonderful, but I think you're awesome, but
But I've
yeah,
heard that. I was
yeah,
like, oh, you
you
Val,
know,
you're awesome, but
yeah.
what?
Yeah, exactly. So you hear the buts oftentimes, and then you see those folks sometimes go on with people that are less quality, than you are, and you try to figure out what is it about that. By the same token, I believe that if you're gonna spend time entertaining a person and consistently being in their space, then you need to be very clear about where we're going. Is there a possibility that we're clear on where we are? Because it works both ways. Because you see people who they want to keep a person in the friend zone to a certain degree because they are getting benefits, and not necessarily sexual benefits, but the benefits of that person's time, talent, treasure, the benefit oftentimes,
Occupying.
yeah, of that person treating them, taking them out, buying them things, and doing things. So if that's continued to happen, you say to yourself, well, what I need to be in a relationship for? I'm getting everything I want, and I'm not in a relationship. No, we're about to pack up shop here. I need to let you know that if I'm in the friend zone, that I'm gonna remain in the friend zone. And guess what? This is not gonna be that way. When we go out, sometime if we decide to continue to go out, then guess what? You might want to be considering that you're gonna pick up your own tab. Now I
Mhm.
say that boldly, but I don't even know how to do that. It's just tough for me inside of that. But that's why you have to differentiate and delineate between what you are. Being stuck in the friend zone means the fact you'll always be exiled from a real chance. You're outside the door, the song was "Baby, you got what I need, but you say you're just a friend."
And then you in that friend zone, and you have to listen to them talk about other
Oh
guys and
yeah,
stuff like that. It's a yeah,
yeah,
so it's
yeah. That was my life growing up, through life and through school. I was a girl's best friend. They talked to me about everything, and kind of talked to me about the boyfriends and the problem they was having with boyfriends. And there was sometime I would be saying, "What about me? What?" Of course, under my breath, right? You're just such a good guy. You're just so good to talk to. I was going through my old yearbooks, my high school yearbooks here a few months ago, and I'm reading some of these comments, and I remember still like, "Oh, you're such a great guy. I'm gonna miss you. You'll do great."
you
Yes, goodness, yes. But at the end of
I
the
hope we're hoping that some of the transparency that we're sharing and comments and stuff that you leave for us, we take them very seriously. And we do this because we love individuals. We love to empower and inspire individuals to be a greater version of themselves. And we hope that each week that you listen, that you become empowered and say, I'm not going to do things the same old way. It's time for me to do a shift in my life. And whatever that shift is, going upward, not downward, we hope you embrace that. And there's a phone number, the National Mental Illness Hotline, 1-800-950-6264. That's 1-800-950-6264. You know, they don't even have to know who you are. Just call and talk to someone, and by all means seek professional help. Reach out and get professional help. And I don't mean say, well, let me go to the church and go to a prayer meeting and you thinking lay hands on you and it's done, you healed. No, 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 no. You need to get this talk. You need to pull back the layers and see what's in there so that healing can take place. Because a lot of us is broken, especially women. A lot of women are broken. They've been hurt so deeply, so badly, not only by relationships, but by family members. And you need healing from that. So I encourage you to seek professional help.
Dr. Val, we cannot emphasize it enough. You talk about causes of suicide. A lot of people uh, get to that place where they feel like if they can't have you, no one else will. Sometimes they get to the place where they don't want to live. I mean, there are songs that people have written, I don't want to live without you, and no, I can't breathe without you. And although they're put to these little romantic tunes, reality is that it's oftentimes a desperate cry. It's a desperate cry for help. It's a desperate cry to be loved. It's a desperate cry to be valued. It's a desperate cry to feel significant. Every one of us were created with a sense of belonging. We need
To belong somewhere.
wanting to belong, to relate. And so when we let people in, it's a place of vulnerability. It's a place of trust. And when trust is violated, it's a tough thing to deal with. I often say that love, yes, love is what covers multitudes of fault. Love is as tough as Teflon. Love can endure. But trust, when trust is broken, it's like breaking fine china. It's hard to put back together again.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to. It's hard.
Indeed.
So that trust is important. Is but trust yourself first. Don't openly just trust people right from the beginning. What is it that they have invested to show you that they're trustworthy? Buying you an Admiral meal at Red Lobster is not enough to ensure your trust.
Exactly.
Little superficial
Try
things.
them. Try,
Right.
like I said, the word even says, try the spirit by the spirit,
Mhm.
see if they're God.
Yeah.
You can try an individual because they could only be a chameleon, but for so long.
But for so long.
Watch. And that's where the scripture watch as well as pray comes in.
Mhm.
There's a lot of benchmarks that you can go to secure yourself in a progressing relationship or even know if it's a relationship, because guess what? When you know your spirit is right, and then the relationship will be right. And I'm speaking from experience. When I met my husband, I knew everything was in place. I knew it. And you got to know within yourself, not out of your imagination,
Mhm.
because we have a lot of individuals in relationships with people that don't even know their name. They,
Absolutely.
they'll go to a restaurant just because they've learned somebody's routine and they're going to be there, and they'll be talking to individuals saying, yeah, I'm going to meet my friend, this and that, and they sitting at one table and they sitting at the other. The person has no idea who they are, but they've formed an imagination, a relationship out of their imaginations that that individual doesn't know. That's mental illness.
Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah.
mental illness.
That's a
So
couple of sandwiches short of a picnic is what that is. And
yeah,
we
yeah.
have
I mean, I have friends that were in relationships with people that they thought they was in a relationship with individuals that they have no clue that they even exist, or that there was any vulnerable, where they weren't even vulnerable to be open to a relationship out of their imaginations. So we have to check ourselves, check our psyche, see where we are, and then also find out if you're even open to the possibility of loving and being loved.
you know, Whitney Houston put it best when she says, learning to love yourself
Mhm.
is the greatest love of all. When you can validate yourself, when you can affirm yourself, when you can esteem yourself, it speaks volumes in recognizing who you are. It is so amazing that even in the world that we live in with social media, we will determine our significance based upon the number of likes we get.
Hmm.
We will determine our significance, our value, what we mean to people based upon likes, affirmations. And yet, it's still many of these people don't know who you are, don't care who you are. Whether or not they hit like, thumbs up, or whatever or not, it doesn't define who
Social
you
media has exposed the instability of
are.
a
Mhm.
lot of people.
Totally.
I mean, there's so many people that are unstable and they're exposed through social media. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like breaking records, but we're out of time now, Dr. J. But there are
I see.
individuals that are in relationships and they shouldn't be in there. There's a domestic violence hotline, 1-800-799-7233, 1-800-799-7233. And the mental illness hotline, once again, is 1-800-950-6264. I hope you've enjoyed your time with us this evening. And again, we hope that we've brought value. And remember, love affects our past, our present, and our future. It is an emotion and a gift given to us from God, and it should never, ever hurt. Good night and God bless until next week. And don't forget to visit our websites, www.jrthicklin.com, www.jrthicklin.com, and also my website, fromthesoulafofawoman.com. Good night and God bless.
Good night.